You do not want to feed them a grain-free diet. But who knows that?
Right. We don't know. We just see the marketing, the ads, the TikTok, and the Instagram reels that get promoted to us. Dogs are carnivores and they eat raw, but is that right for my dog? I don't know, right? Welcome to the Dog Mom Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and the company that you started?
Absolutely. Well, so I am a horse person, dog person, and a biotech person. So my life here in Silicon Valley revolves around biotechnology. So I'm a nerd. Sorry. And what my expertise entail are surgical and behavioral models in preclinical medicine in preparation for translation into humans. And what that means is every time somebody comes running out of Stanford with a dish in their hand, screaming, "Eureka, I found it, the cure for whatever, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancer, all these different things," the first thing they want to do is go put this cure into people. And you can't do that for a lot of reasons. And so because there are laws in place to protect people and to regulate research, the FDA, among other bodies, requires that you do animal testing for everything first to check for safety, to check for efficacy, and so on and so forth. And part of what I do or did is to refine and build those models in a way that they are relevant, very relevant, choose the correct species, choose the correct environment, choose exactly how you're going to do it. And also that you are negating as much pain and suffering as you possibly can. You don't want to replicate things unnecessarily. You don't want to use the wrong species or the wrong technique. And you don't want to do things that are needless and don't count. Doesn't make me super happy. It is extraordinarily expensive. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward into the future, and one of my goals has been to conduct this research in a way that doesn't keep animals in a lab. And this is one of the ways to do this. We are collecting all these DNA samples from all these cool horses and dogs. And we have all this feedback from the owners, pictures and videos, what we call phenotypes, proof of health and performance. And this is an accelerated way to discover things in mammals without having anything live in a laboratory to do it. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's really quite interesting how you do. And such a different part of the industry that, me as a business owner and making dog toys, I'm not knowledgeable about, but it's so interesting to learn because, we all love our dogs and our dogs are such a big part of our life. And, I feel I'm interested because I feel like it sheds a lot of light on, their genes, their behavior, and what we can do as owners to give them the best life that we can. So very interesting. And talk about how you kind of went from the DNA with horses and into dogs as well, how you transitioned.
Well, funnily enough, our initial start was going to be in the dogs back in 2013, 2014, but we realized that the industry wasn't ready yet. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of details there that have to do with how the animals are kept and raised and trained, which lends itself to proving the platform, proving the science out. Tends to be easier, less expensive, and more precise in horses. But we were going to build them in parallel. And there are some dirty Silicon Valley backstories about who was involved in building the dog platform and who we signed to the company to help us build that, who then later ran off and built a dog company that's okay. But to cut some corners. And may cause some heartaches and problems for some people. So we're helping to mend some of those things. But in reality, when we started this in 2013, 2014, people understood that genetics were probably a thing, but they didn't understand that they might be the thing. And now people get it. They understand some things are written in stone when you are created. And some things are sort of set up to happen, and other things could happen in the future,
Mhm.
right? So that's sort of the story of genetics and why we want to develop this for our pets. So you can understand how your animal is going to be, how it could be, and how you could prevent or enhance something that they're heading towards.
So, what was kind of an instance where somebody wasn't convinced, and then seeing the work that you've done is now convinced of genetics playing a huge role? Can you give us an example of that?
I can give you like 100 examples. I'm gonna think you want a dog example. So
Yeah.
I will put one out because it's about to be a publication release that you guys can see. It'll be a lot of fun. We had a breeder of Tibetan Mastiffs, and they sent us some samples so we could understand what the genetics for the Tibetan Mastiff actually looks like. And when we ran all of the genes that were known, and then we fed it into our AI, which then produces an image of what it thinks the dog should look like based on the rules that we know, the dogs had the wrong length of hair. They had short hair when they were supposed to have long hair, and so on and so forth. And the breeder got very upset. This is not what my dog looks like. Your genetics are wrong, blah, 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 blah. And then we figured out pretty quickly that her dogs had a mutation that had been undiscovered for hair length. And so we keep finding all these new genes using this feedback loop. So we took someone who gave us some samples to test, was really looking at us up close and personal, was really incensed when it didn't say what she wanted it to say or what she thought it should say. And she was right, but we could not have known that until she said something. And then we went back to the genetic code and went, wait, what is this sequence? What does this even mean? And we figured out, oh, it's a new one for hair length.
Wow.
So there are a bunch of stories like that.
And as a non-science person, I'm just trying to wrap my head around like how you even look at that. Can you point to a specific location on a gene for it to say, oh, this can determine hair length?
You can. So
like a specific spot.
Well, in some cases, there is like one really well-known spot for something. And in other cases, there are multiple spots. An example I can use that's really well documented in horses are simple things like white markings and blue eyes. So some horses have white markings, and some of them have white markings and blue eyes, and some of them have just blue eyes. Well, there are a couple of regions. There's one called MITF, MITF. And if you have changes in that area of the genome, it often results in white markings, large ones or smaller ones, depending on the type of change. And the same is true for KIT, KIT. It's another region where you'll see white markings. And what it does is the change in the genome affects where your melanocytes, your color cells, migrate during development. And where they don't migrate, where the genome is altered or broken or absent, you'll get areas of depigmentation. And so while there are a few known, when an animal presents with really cool white markings, blue eyes, or other color changes, and they don't show the genes that are known for those particular things, then we go back and look at the raw code and go, is there anything here that looks weird, that doesn't look normal, that doesn't look like anything we've identified before? And many times we look in those regions that are known and go, oh, there it is. Sometimes we have to look outside of those regions. Recently, we found a new one in horses, and we called it, I think, EDX white or something after Edelon Diagnostics. And we find new regions that result in these markings or attributes.
Wow, that's
so the answer is sometimes there are known reasons and some regions that we are sure about, and other times it's a wild goose chase. Where is it?
Wow. And, you have to have pictures of the animals that they're from and then compare it to maybe those that don't have these white markings. And then you can compare and contrast and see where in other spots, if they're unknown, that you can see the genetics for these type of markings.
That's exactly right. And if you'd like to explore, I can show you some images of animals that have the same kind of genetic change as humans, and you can take a look at the similarities between the animal and the human, and it is startling.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I was just wondering, are you trying to also get these samples from all different types of breeds? And is it kind of your goal to map all of the breeds and different animals within that breed as well?
So breed is a fun thing, and it's important to understand if you can identify an animal by breed. But here's a fun fact: not all purebreds are purebred because they didn't hit the ground 5,000 years ago as separate breeds.
Mm.
They all came from the same groups of dogs, right? They just have created certain mutations and inbred those mutations over time. So we have these diverse animals. But often newer breeds have such a mix of genes that they're very difficult to identify because their genetic signature involves overlap from all these different regions and groups, right? You couple that with the fact that pure breeding is kind of going out of fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why is it going out of fashion? Because is breed really as important as survivability, health, and capability and suitability? Not really. Do I care what breed my dog is more than I care about whether or not she can live with me, that she's the right size, the right temperament, the right energy level for me? I don't really care what her label is. I want to know if she's suitable for the environment that she's in. And so we are doing breed comparisons. And yes, we are collecting samples of rare breeds, known breeds, making sure that those gene and genetic signatures are well defined for fun. But we're more interested in, does the dog have the right health profile? Does it have the right length of fur, the right energy level, the right size, the right temperament for what you want it to do?
That's interesting. Yeah, because some people might say, "Oh, I'm looking for a golden retriever because I've
Yeah.
read that their temperament is this and this." And then maybe you do adopt or get choose one from a breeder, and they don't really necessarily match up with their expectations. I mean, just knowing my own dogs, they have very wide difference in their temperament, and also when we got Kramer, who is our golden doodle, he's very chill. He's very friendly, just like the normal golden doodle. And we've had friends acquaintances that also got a golden doodle, and their golden doodle's temperament is just not the same, right? So you can't look at one specific dog and think, oh, I like that, I'm going to go get another one of the same breed. Even within the same litter, obviously there's a huge range in temperament as well. So very, very interesting. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. A simple example of that, golden retrievers. We know that there are all purebred golden retrievers, and there are ones that are show goldens, big, long hair, blocky head, 85 pounds and up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have field goldens, 35 pounds, shorter hair, wildly energetic, smaller structure. Those are both technically golden retrievers. But is their genetic profile going to be the same if you look at behavior, structure, hair, all of this? Not at all. They're two totally different animals. And if you are a single mother living in an apartment and you went to get yourself a nice, big, fluffy golden retriever to babysit your kids and you ended up with a field retriever, that's not going to go well.
That's right. And the colors, in my first golden, JJ, he was kind of more like a reddish golden retriever, and he was very cunning. He loved to run, and he was thinner. And the golden I have now is more of an English cream, where it's a lighter coat, very wide. She just loves to sleep, and running, not really her jam. So just just within the two golden retrievers I've had, there's a huge difference. And yeah, it's just so interesting to see how they're different.
Yeah, and it makes sense if you think about it. People want to think that, oh, if I get a golden retriever, I'm going to get this kind of dog. If I get a German Shepherd, I'm getting that kind of dog. But we all know that's a generalization. And like people, that's just not how that works.
Mm-hmm.
You can't assume that somebody from Russia is a great ice skater. That's just stupid.
Maybe more probable that they are, but not. Yep. It depends on the person.
That's exactly right.
I've always wondered this, like, can you see from the genes, like, a difference between two breeds of dogs versus two breeds of horses? Or do you think Like, what does that look like?
So again, it sort of depends on the age of the breed, right? So animals that have been bred for millennia to be that particular type of animal are highly, highly inbred. And that means imagine a square. And this square is all of the genes possible within any horse in the world. Okay. But if you are an Arabian or a thoroughbred, you have been bred and bred and bred and bred and bred for generations to get this very specific look and ability, such that you've eliminated a huge portion of the genes that are possible. And your genetic signature is very limited. It's a small spot on that big square. And your genetic signature is very clean and clear because it is so limited. In other words, can I take a sample of a random horse and tell you how much genetic overlap, how much thoroughbred it is with a pretty high degree of accuracy? Yes, because their genetic signature is so limited. Can I tell you how much quarter horse another random horse is? Maybe, because quarter horses, they're not really a purebred. They're a mix of things that were created not too long ago to create this animal that's very diverse, that has capabilities from jumping to racing to sliding. And we all know that although you have two purebred quarter horses, the difference may be drastic. One might be 14 hands and downhill built, and the other one might be 16 hands and uphill. And their purposes are completely different, yet they're both purebred quarter horses. Genetically, not the same. Same thing happens with dogs.
Interesting. So what are some of the dog breeds that are newly formed, and what type of dog breeds are kind of, it's been bred for a long time?
So I believe the dog genome reference is based around a boxer. And the reason they use that is because boxers are highly, highly inbred, and their signature is very clear and clean and reliable, right? It's the same over and over and over. And that is true for a lot of really inbred dogs. Things that maybe at one time bottlenecked and almost went extinct, like Shar-Peis, right? There was somebody, I'm not sure if this is verifiable or not, this might be rumoring, but Shar-Peis, I think today's Shar-Pei came out of an original group of 60. That's not very many dogs. So they share a very tight genome, right? But today, everybody's all about purpose breeding, designer dogs. That's why there are doodles coming out of our ears, because people are crossbreeding dogs to get the traits that they want. They want a low shedding coat. They want a family friendly dog. They want this particular size and floppy ears. Then they're going to cross this with that to get what they want. So these newer breeds, doodle crosses, Bernedoodles, what are some of the others? The border paps, right? You've got the Papillon crossed with the border collie to get a really nice agility dog. All of these dogs are going to come up with a smattering of shared genetics, and it won't say border pap unless the parents are super highly inbred border collies and super highly inbred Papillon crossed one generation. But if we're 3 generations down, it's going to be a mishmash.
Right. So you're going to see a lot of variation in these new designer styles, the doodles, and all of the newer crossbreeds. Yeah. And do you see a lot of undesirable traits as well coming from these newer crossbreeding?
You see it the same as you see it in the purebreds. So there's this story about hybrid vigor, and some of that is true and some of that isn't true. It's true if you reduce genetic inbreeding, how many of your genes overlap and are exactly the same, that the animal, especially in horses, is a higher money earner and has less health problems. That's for sure. In dogs, the lower the inbreeding, the healthier the animal. And the reason that is if you have genetic diversity, you have a built-in tool set to deal with change, because you don't have one genotype at a region. For example, COVID is a really good example of this. Some people could contract COVID and be standing in a grocery store with a slightly runny nose and not know they had it, while their friend, cousin, sister, whatever, got COVID and is on a ventilator and is on death's door. Out of these two people, there are extreme edges of who's more or less susceptible to that virus. Viruses and bacteria, they prefer certain individuals over others based on blood type, based on genotype, so on and so forth, right? And the thing is, if you are in a family and there is an outbreak of some sort, you'd have to choose which genotype you want to be, and you're gambling. You don't know which of these genotypes that disease prefers. Your best bet is to have one of each. Then you're slightly susceptible, but you're also resistant. You have the best chance of survival.
Right.
So
Survival of all of the family. Yeah.
All of it. So that if you're stuck with one genotype, you're not susceptible to this. You're extremely resistant, but then you died of that. Right? You want diversity. That is a real, true advantage.
Right. And have you seen breeders kind of use this technology to plan like future, who to breed, like what type of dog to breed with their dog? How do you see breeders using this type of technology?
So going back to the question you asked me before is if you see adverse things in some of these designer dogs, you certainly do. For example, no one likes to talk about Frenchies because they breed them so they have this kind of smushed in face, a shorter muzzle, and a big rounded head. And then they breed these cool colors. Silver is a very popular color, right? And in order to get those dogs, they tend to breed those dogs on the way they look, hoping to get the same thing out of the puppies, right? But what if you had a tool where you could select completely unrelated individuals, each of them carrying some of the traits that you want? And when you cross them, you get a lower inbreeding coefficient, but you preserve those traits. I got a shorter muzzle, but not a really smashed in one. I got the color I wanted, but I didn't get a double up of it from both parents because they were related to start with. And I got a lower risk for any other unknown diseases or cancers because I've got two totally unrelated individuals. I cross them, create the dog I want that has a lower inbreeding coefficient. That is what Build a Dog is intended to do. So you can get what you want and reduce what you don't.
Yeah, and I feel like that would, save a lot of suffering for a lot of dogs that, could potentially result from a pairing that you didn't do a lot of research on. And, those dogs go on to have a lot of health issues and can't live as long. And, these families are trying to adopt a companion for hopefully 12, 13, 15 years. And, they don't want to lose a dog early on to some of these genetic issues, health issues.
Yeah, and a lot of them can be hidden. You can have a very perfect, beautiful male, a very perfect, beautiful female, but each of them is a carrier for something deadly. And when you cross them, 25% of the offspring get it.
Oh, and what type of issues do you see?
The list is long. So you'll see things from like myocardial infarction, heart issues. You'll see immunodeficiencies, you'll see abnormalities, cancers, you name it, seizures, on and on and on and on. These are things that are carried in the genome. Again, if they are carried in heterozygote form, you have one copy of it. Many times you'll not know you have it. But if you breed with the same animal that has the same type of thing and they get two copies, then the disease comes out. These are called lethal recessives, things that you need two copies of that recessive gene to come out, and then it ends in death or really bad consequences, right? And a lot of times the approach to governing this sort of problem is, well, let's get rid of all animals carrying lethal recessives. So why is that not a good idea? Because you and me and everyone walking the planet carries at least a half a dozen lethal recessives. We'd all be dead. You can't do that.
Right.
That won't work. I mean, it will, but not the way you intended.
Right. Yeah. And I've also thought about kind of the deeper implications of doing DNA research and genes. And, of course, it helps so much and it can eliminate some of the suffering. But also, what is the entrance into the ethical boundaries, right? How do you approach that, and how do you think of it as, we're doing this for animals, we're doing it for the horses and for dogs. I hear a lot of people doing IVF, and I hear rumors that they're like, oh, you can select certain traits. And I, am worried on a human level.
Yep.
Like we're selecting these traits, and how does that impact future generations? And how do you approach that?
We have always been doing that. We have always been selecting for traits. And that's what's funny about the argument for genetically modified anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you have been purpose breeding, you're genetically modifying. That's what you're doing.
Right.
The difference is in the past, you had to eyeball the animals and go, well, I think they're going to pass this on. I think they're going to pass that on. And in my mind, if I cross these two, I'm going to get this perfect whatever. But you're guessing because you don't really know the interplay of genes and you don't really know what the risk factors are underlying, like I said, the hidden lethal recessives. So you really don't have a way of guaranteeing that that litter of puppies won't all have this particular disease that you didn't know they would have because the parents carried it. Instead, if you want, again, going back to the Frenchies, I hate to pick on them, but they're just so, they're so cute.
They are cute.
You can pick individual traits, the color, the size, the shape of the head and the shape of the muzzle to improve their ability to breathe, to improve their ability to live, and still make what you want. Only a better version of it. You're not going to be able to control for everything. A lot of it is just straight up statistics. Certain things will be thrown half of the time and other things won't. You can't control for that. But what you can do is reduce the harm. Do not cross two animals with some heart problem. Do not cross two animals that are going to cause seizures. Do not cross two animals who are going to result in puppies that can't breathe.
Right, right.
So you can reduce the harm.
Right. Yeah, and I had another golden retriever. She passed at age 3 because of congenital kidney disease, and she was diagnosed at just over a year old. So we found out that her left kidney was not developed, and her right kidney was not developed, and her left was enlarged because it was working overtime. And we didn't know this. And she was such a healthy dog from when she was born. And one day, she just kind of collapsed, and she was panting really hard, and we knew something was really wrong. So we rushed her to the hospital, and figured it out. And she lived another just over a year with us, and I always wonder, like, obviously the breeder did not know of this issue. And when I asked about the other puppies in the litter, and she said they don't have any issues. So it was just the one fluke. And I wonder, if that could have been prevented somehow. I don't know. But, I just feel like her life was kind of cut way too short, and didn't get to spend another 10 years with us. So I do I wonder about that, if there was a way to even see that somehow.
The answer is there could be, and I say there could be because I don't know in your particular case what your dog actually had. I know acute kidney failure is brutal. It's really bad, and it's hard to deal with, and it's a struggle all the way till the end. And I'm sorry for you, especially at that age. That's really, really rough. But there are cases, you can use diabetes as an example. In the human world, if your parents have what we call late onset diabetes, right, and they have the genetics that they've passed on to you for a predisposition for diabetes, if you know about that in your teens and 20s, are you going to change your diet and exercise to prevent that from happening by the time you're 40? Yeah. And that's the kind of thing you can do with this. If you know a dog has got a particular, let's say, there's a variant set in there that predict heart issues. And one of the things that's happening right now is everybody's all about grain-free diets. That's all the rage. And I get that. I feed my dog raw and a bunch of other stuff. But in this case, an animal with this variant set will actually, it does harm to these animals. You do not want to feed them a grain-free diet. But who knows that? Right.
We don't know. We just see the marketing, the ads, the TikTok, and the Instagram reels that get promoted to us. Dogs are carnivores and they eat raw, but is that right for my dog? I don't know, right?
I mean, and is your dog wild and foraging? No. Also, it's not entirely true that wild dogs and wolves are strictly carnivores. That's not true. They eat a lot of different things for different reasons, right? So you're right. The marketing can be really confusing. And it's okay to watch all that and enjoy it and have the ideas, but it's really important if you have a dog with any of these predispositions to just go, that was a pretty picture and I enjoy the nice packaging, but this is the wrong diet for my dog.
Yeah, and raw can be the right choice for some dogs, right? So I'm not necessarily discounting any type of food for any type of dog,
No.
because we're just out here trying to find the best food for a dog, and there's a lot of different options out there, and it does get overwhelming. I feel like you have to research, as a consumer, we have to research so much about their food, about their
Yeah.
supplements, about their skin and allergies, which affects a lot of dogs out there. And a lot of people I know are always looking for ways to deal with their dog's allergies. It's kind of an ongoing thing.
Of course. Allergies are a nightmare, right? Any of these things are issued. And you couple that with the fact that feeding your dog is not unlike buying accessories for your dog. It gives us pleasure. It's fun to give them something new and watch whether or not they like it, right? So why not do that? But you want to do it with a note in the back of your head that says, look, these things are all fine except for that one.
Right.
Let's not do that.
Right. And some people learn, like us, like we learn by elimination, right? Because if my dog doesn't do well on chicken, and okay, you might have to go through many weeks of that to actually realize, oh, chicken was the factor or beef was the factor. And
it's so painful.
Once you find that out, it's like, oh my gosh, like that's a huge weight lifted. But sometimes we just don't know that.
That's right. That's right. And we also can do impart our own habits on our dogs. I have some friends who are like, oh, our dog is eating vegan. I'm like, okay, I don't know what to say to that. I don't know if it's good for their dog or bad for their dog, but just because they like it and prefer it doesn't necessarily mean it's the correct diet for their dog, right?
That's
so
true.
Let's do it based on their genetic code and according to what your veterinarian says.
Right, right. What type of advice do you have to give to us to know what to feed our dogs, what not to feed our dogs? What can we do as pet parents to kind of educate ourselves on our specific dog?
Homework. Do not believe everything somebody posts on Facebook, even if they are an expert trainer or an influencer or whatever. Go and find out when somebody says this is the best diet for, or it has these vitamins, or this does that. Look for clinical proof. If they do not have clinical studies published that are validated by outside forces, people who are not in the company or not in that brand, there's no proof. And that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It just means there's no proof of what they're claiming. And there's no proof it's good for your dog. You have to take on the responsibility and do the homework. And if you're not sure about something, let's say even a genetic test, you send in a sample and you get a result back and it looks weird to you, ask the question. Call the company, call the geneticist, whatever you need to do, and ask the question. This result looks weird to me because X, Y, Z, or I don't understand it. Because nothing's infallible. Things could be wrong, or things could be skewed, or things could be right, and you don't know what to do with it until you ask the question. So it's your dog. Demand answers for them. They need to be spoiled.
No, 100%. And you're their only advocate, right? Because they can't talk, they can't tell you where it hurts, and you got to do the research. And, my husband, when my dog Birdie was going through her whole diagnosis and, we went to several specialists, and he did a lot of research on the clinical studies, like you said, to see what people have said works for their dog and kind of compare that with the evidence. And I really credit to his, advocacy for our dog and the research that he did, that she lived another 16 months when she was only given like two months to live, basically. Basically, when we took her in, the vet was like, okay, well, you should make preparations. She's not going to last another 2 months. And she lived, over a year after that. And that's because we did all the research and, tried all these techniques. And some really did work. And sometimes we brought that information to the vet as well. And the vet was like, okay, I see that. Let's try that. Or, and sometimes they might not know that as well. And, when you bring it up, they're like, okay, that correlates with my experience or my studies. Sure. And, we can kind of marry the two types of information and create the best plan for our dog.
And that's the key, flexibility, right? And it's on you to do the homework for your dog. Yes, the vet is an expert, but the vet doesn't have all day to look up every new study that just came out. And if you bring it to the forefront and say, hey, is this something? That's very helpful. And the right vet will appreciate that. Mm-hmm. For me, I always have the sort of this like philosophy in the back of my mind that my dog is in my life and she's important. But to my dog, I am her life. I'm her whole world.
Right.
So I have to do right by her.
Right. And tell me about kind of the dog that inspired you, or do you have several dogs that inspired you to do what you're doing right now, or to start your company?
That's a tougher answer. I have had many dogs. I'm obsessed with my current dog. I've had horses for as long as I could, which was fairly recently. I like animals better than people. And anything I can do that will involve animals for me personally as my focus, and also better some things for the humans that maybe I have slight disdain for, I think is a really good use of my life and my ability. I enjoy science. I enjoy animals immensely. And sometimes I see things a little bit differently than maybe others might see it. And sometimes those things come up and they're useful. And if I can share those and then riff off of how other people see it and say, hey, I thought this might work. What do you think? And they go, oh yeah, that's cool. But did you try that? No, I didn't, but let's try it. The more, the merrier. And this is a way to involve people who have the kind of passion that we have here, our team has here. I don't know if passion's the right word. I think obsession is probably more accurate. We like to share what we do, and we love it when our clients share their stuff, when they talk about their dogs. That phone call with the Tibetan Mastiff, she was so mad. She was right. And we found something new because of it. And now everybody's like super happy. This was awesome, right? And so just by communicating and sharing your obsession and your expertise and what you've seen, we all found something cool. So why not?
Right. Yeah. And it's great that you pour that passion into animals, into your work, and kind of create that balance as well. And, I also am a huge animal lover, dog lover. And the story I always tell
is sign behind your head, dog mom.
Dog, yeah, everything.
Big letters.
100%. And the story I always tell is I had been asking my parents for a dog ever since I could probably speak. And my parents had a lot of strength. And they didn't say yes until I was 13 years old, when I was, I don't know. I have two toddlers, and I'm like, I don't know how you even had the resolve to say no to me for so many years. But they waited until I was responsible enough to actually take care of a dog, to do that. And, ever since then, I just pour everything into my dogs. And even after I have kids, I still feel like I love my dogs just the same, if not even more, right? Like, they're still my babies. And I've gotten more dogs since then. And obviously I started a company designing toys for dogs because, I just want to bring happiness to dogs everywhere and kind of share that joy with everybody. And I just love the pet industry so much,
Yeah. Have your parents figured out that you're not going to get past your obsession with dogs?
No, I think they've realized that, this is what I'm going to do. Whatever I do will involve dogs and animals. It's just a great industry, and I love talking to people. And that's why I started the Dog Mom podcast, is to talk to people like yourself that have such amazing experiences and knowledge within the industry that I don't have, but it's so cool to understand like different parts, different companies and what they do. And so thank you again for sharing your experience with us.
My pleasure. And I can't thank you enough for doing this. It's super fun to rap back and forth about them. So
yeah. Do you have any like other stories of, people who have used kind of like the DNA services and found something super heartwarming or surprising? Any stories like that that you can share with us?
Well, we had one just pop up yesterday. So we had somebody whose animal we had done the DNA on, and it said that they had possible predisposition to urinary crystals, and it's a female, and it's not the breed of the genetic variant discovery. In other words, this gene was discovered in a particular breed, and this dog was not that at all. And turned out with that report, the veterinarians figured out what was wrong with the dog, and she has crystals in her urine, and so they just need to switch her diet. And the owner was just going nuts about it. Like, if we hadn't had this, we wouldn't understand. We'd still be diagnosing her, and this is going to help. So that was unexpected and super appreciated, and we loved the feedback. And then we've had other stories of not sure where this puppy came from, and here is a relative, and here are the parents of that relative, and then they start to figure out who we came from, where our pack is. We've done that with horses a bunch of times. In horses, we've been doing it a lot longer. We've had circumstances where people got a horse out of a kill pen or some other random place, no papers, no information. DNA led us to figure out who the parents were, and they went back and registered it, and it's ready to go.
Oh, wow.
Who knew, right?
Yeah.
And so DNA tells a story, and it certainly is not a fate of what you are going to be for certain, but it has a great deal of influence of what you can be and where you're headed. And if people know that about their animals, for example, you have a 2-year-old that you've adopted, and when it comes to your house, this happens a lot. You're fostering a 2-year-old and it's shy and it's quiet and blah, blah, blah. And then after it gets comfortable, man, look out. And in the DNA, there are some indications there that you're going to have to deal with this once they start to mature and come out of their actual personality, right? And so if you know an animal is going to have things like, I don't know, animal aggression or anxiety, some of these things that animals are predisposed to, you can put things in place to prepare for that and maybe negate the problem. Once it's started, it's really hard to stop.
Right. And I feel that it probably helps people to connect better with their animals as well, because it kind of gives you a story of where they came from, what their history or their lineage is like. And once you have that connection, you can really look to the future, right? And start building a life with them as well. And it's always so interesting to learn about your pet. And now that you mentioned the urinary infection, I have a Dalmatian right now, and they're prone for urinary crystals. So that's something that I probably should look into more and help her prevent that as well.
Yeah, and Dalmatians are a great example because Dalmatian is developed with a very specific look. And there's a very well-documented problem. If you combine the wrong Dalmatians, you get so much white that you get deafness, right? And blindness and other things like that. So they're a perfect example, like the Frenchies, of if you're going to cross them, pick the right 2 adults so that you can minimize those problems in these really cool dogs.
Yeah, I do follow a couple of breeders just because I love the breed so much now. And they do say, a certain number of puppies in their litter could be deaf, and I've seen them post about it. So it's really interesting to kind of learn about that, and maybe it could be prevented. And I'm sure they do their best, but unfortunately, they are more prone to deafness and blindness.
Sure. Yeah, and the more you can do to reduce that, the better.
Yeah. Definitely. So, where can people go and find more about your company or yourself?
Oh, gosh. Well, we're all over the place. Obviously, Facebook, and the straight up URL is just AlphaDog DNA. You can also find us by our parent company, which is Etalon. So it's Etalon, ETALONDX, as in dog, x-ray.com. But we do both dogs and horses, and our approach is the same. We take a global view of your animal. We look for the whole picture of the animal, what it looks like, what it moves like, what its health is like, what attributes does it have, colors, size, tail shape, ear shape, eyes, nose, all of this kind of stuff. And then we provide applications and an environment that allow you to use this information like the marketplace. Here's a profile of your dog. Your dog has a white, fluffy, high shedding coat and maybe anxiety predisposition. So here is a bluing shampoo to its low shed, and here is a local trainer or therapist near you, or here is a thunder jacket that might help with that. It provides you with solutions, and the solutions are provided by our clients. We don't sell anything like that, and we don't take money from anybody who does that. What we do is say, hey, these are our 5 favorite things for heavy chewers. What are yours? And if we all add in our favorite things and we start talking to each other, you might say things like, hey, this no bark collar is awesome for my schnauzers, but don't even think about trying it on your border collie, because that's how we're going to find stuff out. So it's all about sharing and conversation and interaction. But again, it's AlphaDogDNA.com. And once you get your results, you are entitled to a free consult with a live human being who is also dog obsessed.
That's amazing. I think I might have to try that for my Dalmatian, because I just want to know more about what type of foods she can and cannot have, because I know Dalmatians have that issue with the uric acid.
Skin injury, skin allergies,
Yes, and she does get some like these rust spots along her head where it, it's white and I can see the rust spots. And she gets them on and off, so I know it's some type of allergy, but it's not so bad that I need to give her any medication for it. So probably I need to do some more research and be a better dog mom. So thank you so much, Christa, for sharing your experience. And this has been a really wonderful episode. I'm sure our guests will love listening to it.
Thank you again for the opportunity. We love your podcast. We love dog moms.